give a round of applause for my friend, Colin O'Neill.
Thanks, Dave. How's everyone doing? Good. All right, great. So yeah, as Dave mentioned, I lead the experience design team at ISITE, and what I wanted to talk to you guys today about is a little bit of the type of systems that we create and the types of stories that they tell. So let's jump in and start here. Christmas 1982. And I'll never forget that year because growing up in Dublin, we didn't get a lot of snow. And that year, we just had the biggest snowstorm ever. It was like a kid's picture book snowstorm. When you look out your window, everything was covered in 4 to 5 feet of snow. And that was a really big deal for us. Another really big deal that year was this. Even though now I know that we were barely scraping by at that time, somehow my parents managed to get us the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Anybody here have one of these? A few people. Awesome. Great. They're amazing little machines. They were 8-bit, 48K computers. It was called the Spectrum because, as you see in the little flash on the side there, it introduced color for the first time. So you had 8 colors to choose from. You had this really rich palette of things you could do. But even now, even today, I can still feel the feel of those little rubber keys on my fingertips. Because this was a long time before computers or technology could really connect us in meaningful ways. But there was something really powerful for me happening here. We played a lot of games, all the classics like The Empire Fights Back. That was a big one for us. I spent a lot of time playing games, and then I really started to try and understand what was going on. How were these games created, and how did these systems work? So I also spent many long evenings typing in code from magazines. This was the way that you would create software at the time. They would publish long pages of code in these magazines, and you would sit in your bedroom or in the living room and have your family yell at you because they wanted to watch soccer on TV and say, no, I'm using the TV, I'm coding. And it's really, to me, kind of very, very similar to a lot of the work we do today. I was learning a new language there. I was learning BASIC, learning how to code. And I think in the kind of more sophisticated digital systems that we're building today, I think we're also learning a new language as we go. And I think we need to kind of understand what this language is, and I think we're still in the early days of understanding what that language is going to be. Let's take a closer look at the cover of Sinclair User Incorporating Spectrum User magazine. This is from 1984. And there's a big feature here on the amazing musical capabilities of the Spectrum. Pop Goes the Micro was the big headline. And I think there's a story here that is really true for me, and I think probably for a lot of people here in the audience. Look at the image here, and this is just your typical rock and roll story. You see an amazing mustache, a saxophone player with a mullet, the guy at the back with just this gravity-defying pop collar action going on. And then there's this guy. And he has this pretty extreme comb over. I don't know if that's fashion or just genetics, but he has tentative facial hair. He's got a shirt and tie and a sweater and a jacket and his ZX Spectrum. But look closely in his eyes and like in the corner of his lips. I see someone who's living a dream right there. I see him being transformed by the power of this simple little device. It's given him a way into the glamorous world of rock and roll, and he gets to hang out with all these cool-looking guys. And just so things don't get too crazy, there's also a feature on software for hypochondriacs. Your guess is as good as mine as to what that could have been. But this is a very true story here for me, and I think maybe for a lot of us. When I'm at my best doing my work, I still feel like that 12-year-old kid, working with systems that I'm starting to figure out as I go, and telling stories that I'm making up in my head, and building a path through our work that's very much like trying to figure out how we coded those early programs. And I think that's true for a lot of us. I think in any experience that we engage in, whether we articulate it or not, whether we can say it to other people or whether it's just an internal monologue, we're the heroes of the stories that we engage in. I think take today, for example. I'm sure this evening, Paul and Katie and the rest of the Delight organizing crew will sit down over a glass of wine and maybe think to themselves in the back of their mind, that was great. We got to put on a nice event. We had 2 days with a lot of people in our community that we care about. And we were able to deliver something of value to them. So there's an internal story within everybody who organized this event. And, I might join them for a glass of wine too, and I might think to myself, that was great. I got to speak at Delight and tell people about my first computer, but also talk about user experience and how that's evolving and how it's helping our organization change from the inside out. And hopefully everyone here goes home and back to work, and you take something from this event and you think, I went to Delight and I heard these amazing things that I'm going to put to work within my role and help change the way I think about my work. So whether we admit it or not, I believe there's always this internal narrative. And this narrative is really important. This idea of the user's individual experience with a system is incredibly powerful. And if we can tap into that, we're on the way to building really meaningful systems and experiences that stay with people for a very long time, just like the Spectrum did with me. And stories have always interested me because a lot of my background was creative direction and in marketing. And for a long time, marketing and mostly advertising owned the stories, right? They got to do the cinematic TV spots with windswept models on the beach selling deodorant or whatever it would be. And then the UX folks, they got to build the systems. They had information architecture and taxonomy and all those other kind of things. But I think what's happened today with digital, as it's kind of changed our roles and impacted the way that we think and engage, is that there's no longer a separation between those two things. I think for customers, people who are using these systems, they don't distinguish between what's a story, what's delivered as a narrative, and what's an experience, what's delivered kind of in that more powerful way. And so I think for us, it enables us to step more directly into the kind of overlap between those two areas. Stories today can still be inspirational, but they're also incredibly functional and useful. And you see everybody day by day tracking down little articles that are shared online that actually are solving immediate problems for them. And systems can still enable people to do certain tasks, but those systems can also be inspirational. They can also be revelationary to people. And so the ability for us to kind of engage in both of these areas at once, I think, becomes very powerful for everybody here to start to engage in. But in any hero story, there's always things that get in the way. And I think if you look at a lot of what the conversation is in the UX space, we're spending a lot of time talking about flat design, and that's an important trend to understand and see where it's coming from. We spend a lot of time thinking about responsive design and wearable technology. And I think these are all really powerful things to be aware of and to be able to connect to. But I think we also need to pay attention to the bigger story. The thing that's driving all of these, I believe, is a shift toward a more honest, more genuine expression of what the digital context really is. That's why we're not doing skeuomorphism anymore, because we know that's a physical thing and we're truly in a digital world. Wearable technology, I think, is important because it's making our connection with these systems much more intimate and much more personal. They are literally part of our bodies 24/7 for a lot of people in the case of Fitbit and any of those quantified life tools. So I think the forces that are making us be a little bit more honest and more genuine about the way the digital experience gets communicated are also helping us reassess a little bit what is the true value, what's the true currency of the digital space. And I don't think it's design. I don't think it's technology. I think it's trust. And it's interesting hearing Daniel speak when he talked a lot about trust between a leader and his team. And when we think about that same kind of relationship between a business and their customers. Trust is what we invest in the digital space. When we spend our time, we make our comments, we purchase things. And trust is also what we can earn in the digital space if we understand it and use it correctly. This is Temkin's 2013 trust ratings. There's a lot of analyst firms who spend time looking at trust and measuring it. And I think what's really interesting here is just looking up at these two up the top. Over here we have USAA. It's ranked number 1. They kind of tied at first place for insurance and banking. And then over here, this is kind of the bottom. This is HSBC coming in at number 246 with a trust rating of 20%. Both these organizations have sophisticated marketing capabilities. They run TV spots, they run glossy ads in magazines, they have digital marketing in all the channels you would expect them to be in. And their websites don't even look all that different. But USAA is doing something that HSBC is not. HSBC has a global marketing budget of $400 million, and they are getting a failing grade on the most important, most fundamental connection that they need to try and make with their customers. And that's not because HSBC isn't trying. That's not because HSBC doesn't care about these things. To me, it's because HSBC and companies like that, the companies who are on the bottom of these type of surveys, are very often hampered by the kind of systems that they work in. And those can be technology systems sometimes, but very often they're organizational systems as well. They're the processes internally within their companies, or the way the company is organized and siloed. And that's a real problem, because much as we like to engage in content, I think we also are learning to read kind of the fundamentals of a digital experience. And so no matter what your budget is, you can't spend your way to trust. You can't market your way to trust. You have to earn it. So companies who are unable to do this, I believe, are suffering because they have old systems, and those old systems are making them tell old stories. And I think we've probably all experienced it, whether you've been in a maze of a phone tree or whether you've been, had some customer service nightmares online. We understand what those systems are telling us. And mostly, I think, at a high level, those systems are telling us, not you. Dave spoke earlier about just kind of a way of flipping around the way you think about engaging with the world. And I think that's because for a very long time it was all about them, right? It was about how businesses can grow, they can build manufacturing capability. And once that became kind of more parity, then it was about distribution and logistics and how you get your products all around the world. And then advertising became a very important part of that to try and communicate a sense of differentiation, which ended up with just everyone kind of trying to yell louder than everybody else. And because what's happened in the digital space is that it's closing the distance between the person and the company, that there's less room for these types of differentiation. Talk to anyone in business, and sure, these are incredibly important things, but they won't get you where you need to get to today. What you need to do is build an ability to communicate the humanity behind the screen and behind the interface. And those systems will allow you to tell different stories, more contemporary stories. Stories of belonging, stories of purpose, and of possibility and understanding. And I think these are the kind of stories that stay with people. They're the kind of contemporary stories that we all want to engage in today because of the kind of stories that we as humans have always wanted to be part of, right? We always have connected with stories that kind of touch on these really powerful core traits of what it means to be human. So we can build systems that allow this type of story to be told, a story that is not us, not you, a story that is you with us, putting the customer truly at the center of how you think about your organization. Then I think that's how you can get to that type of transformation that I think we want a lot of our clients to get to. But these new stories, I think, require a new approach. And I think this is part of the language that we're all learning to speak as things evolve. I think for UX architects, for designers, for strategists, and I think most importantly, perhaps, for agencies and how they engage with their clients, we need to try some new things. We need to be open to new inputs. We need to think about technology differently. We need to think about connectivity and communication and network in different ways. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how at ISITE, we're trying to take some of that energy and have it help our organization evolve. And one of the things that we're doing, I think in a very focused and I think a pretty powerful way within ISITE, is that we're moving beyond a traditional user-centered design approach. I think user-centered design has been, on the whole, maybe somewhat useful, but I think it too is an old system. There's so much more that we need to weave together to create these meaningful experiences today that we can't just follow that more rigid way of approaching things. We need to think beyond a user to a person, to their network, to the context that they might be engaging in, their aspirations, their behaviors, how these things might change and evolve, how the individual is connected to the culture, and what the individual values are and what the cultural values are. And as designers, as people who think about kind of bringing structure and order and inspiration and delight to experience this, why wouldn't we want to engage all of these? This is where the novels are written. This is where art is made. This is the rock and roll band that we get to join if we want to. And so we're not going to just be thinking about a user. And I think yesterday there was a lot of conversation about, can we come up with a better label? And I think the answer is no, we can't label. But if we can think more broadly about a person, if we can design not for a focused scenario, but more broadly for a context, and think about not just individual channels, but think about the power of network connections. And I think what's really important here is for us to think about the person and the technology and the connectivity as one integrated system, because they truly are connected in really powerful ways. Where great technology is going, we're all going to follow, because we all want that great technology, we want that experience. And if we're over here with all the great technology, you know business is going to have to come over to where we are as well. So understanding in a really meaningful and deep way, not just a user, but that broad interconnected device, network, person, whether those are human networks or technology networks, is really important. And moving beyond designing for actions and transactions and designing for engagement. Because I think when we're starting to do this, we're starting to address the imbalance between the business and the customer. And we move beyond this kind of vertical kind of structure where the business communicates up and down to the customer. And we help the customer become more of a partner. And maybe to think of themselves more as a partner. Because I think when you do that, when you kind of get a better balance between a business and a customer, that's where trust can grow. Trust can't really grow very well vertically. It needs kind of that long horizon for things to come up. And so I think if we can start to think more broadly about that, and as we're trying to do this at ISITE, it's incredibly exciting for me to see that happen. I think the clearest expression of why we need to evolve, kind of some of our core tools, is this. I have pretty low expectations of my thermostat. Maybe you guys do too. Its purpose, its affordance, its place in my life has really been defined by this little box. And it tells me that it's going to communicate to me in very truncated, confusing little codes. And it's going to have buttons that mean 15 different things at different points in time. And it's got some switches on it too, because that's kind of cool. And that was okay, I think, for all of us. That's what a thermostat was until it wasn't. When something like Nest comes along, which is still a system that you need to learn how to engage in, and there's it's not perfect. But not only does it control the temperature in your house, but it tells a story. To me, it talks about a more rational, a more simple, a more sustainable future. And that's a story I'm more interested in than this. To me, it tells me more about Nest, the company behind it, that they were able to envision a better way of doing this and actually make it happen fairly quickly. That tells me more about who that company is than any TV spot is ever going to tell me. And I think really importantly, I don't know if anyone's shopped for thermostats, but there's like 12,000 of these, and then there's Nest. And what that allows you to do is it gives you a comfortable context to make a decision in. Nest communicates a point of view. These things, they don't. So I can embrace that point of view or I can reject it. That's fine. That's my choice as a customer. But there's a way now of making a decision about how I want this somewhat small but actually fairly critical kind of piece of technology in my home, and how I want that to communicate to me about where I stand and how I'm engaging in the world. Your choices here are essentially about different shades of beige. Your choice here is about a different way of thinking about how you might want to express and engage with technology within your home. And this is something much more delightful to live with and to experience. So that's kind of, I think, a way of expressing that we want to move beyond, and we want to find a way to make the leaps from the systems and the stories that we may have traditionally told and the new stories that customers really want to hear and want to participate in. Another change is, I think, a real shift in how we look at creative partnership and a more democratic approach to creative. We're doing a lot of co-creation workshops with our clients, and that asks a lot more of the UX designers and the visual designers. You've got to kind of think out loud. You've got to design on your feet with the client. It asks more of the client, too, because they have to learn not to just expect these beautifully polished things that are delivered. But what it allows you to do is connect your expertise with theirs And when you can do that in a meaningful way, the great ideas can swim much further upstream into the client's organization, and they can take root where you couldn't typically get to if you were doing marketing and telling a story, or you couldn't typically get to if you were just designing UX for an interface. Another change that we've had a really great opportunity over the last few months to embrace is taking journey maps, but really spreading them out to be much more broad, total customer lifecycle engagement and experience mapping. How many folks are using journey mapping in their work today? Fair amount, great. When you get the opportunity to stretch that out across an entire life cycle, you get to really uncover and align what some of those internal stories might be for the customers. And that's a really powerful way of making sure that the promise you make on day one is the promise you deliver on, at the end of your life cycle engagement with the organization. And I think all of these ways of working, they ask for more iteration and more collaboration. And truly, I think for all of us, they demand more inspiration. And I don't mean that we need to sit around and wait for the muse to visit us and inspiration to strike. I think today, it's up to us to go out there and hunt it down and bring it, sometimes kicking and screaming, back into your work every single day. If you're not bubbling over with inspiration and excited by all the opportunities that are available to us, you do, I think, the work a disservice. And I think we've all seen some of these great stories. Obviously, everybody has heard in amazing amounts of detail the Apple story. But I think one of the things that always stood out to me about that story is not that they just built an ecosystem that allowed them to really bring this idea of insanely great experiences to life. But along the way, their sense of purpose was so strong that they were able to help the failing music industry find a sense of structure and become relevant again. And if you can have that powerful sense of purpose, you can do more than just build out an amazing experience for your organization. You can really have an impact on everything else that your organization can connect to. And Nike, for a very long time, has owned this incredibly inspirational story of just do it. But we all know Nike Plus has allowed people actually to participate in that story and make it their own in very personal, intimate, and meaningful ways. And I think, for me, one of the most pure, digitally native kind of platform stories is Twitter. And I think no matter what the founders may say in interviews today, my gut says that they didn't really know what Twitter was when they created it. And I think that's its genius. Twitter is a system that allows us as people to tell our own stories, to find purpose, to make connections. And initially, maybe some of those stories weren't the most exciting stories in the world. But we've gone beyond that to transformative stories and to truly revolutionary stories, too. Twitter is what we want it to be. So if we complain that it's just all noise, that's because we're not finding the right stories for us within that system. Brian Solis talks about investing in building communities where the value is more than belonging to something. It's about doing something together that makes that belonging matter. That's quite a sentence, but I think I love the spirit of what this is saying. And it reminds me of when I was coding in those little basic programs back in the day. I was trying to understand what this system could do, and when I was able to give it direction and make it do things, that became incredibly powerful to me. So I think for us in the UX community, the design community, it says to me that we need to build systems to help people live a better story. There's an opportunity for us to take our work to a deeper place in how it connects with our clients and to a more meaningful place ultimately for the customers and the people who use it. Because the stories that people tell themselves are incredibly powerful. If it's a story that we trust, that we can participate in, and that we can be the hero within, those stories actually have the power to change those systems that they exist in. So business is a pretty complex system, and it moves, I guess, relatively slowly. But today it's arrived at a place where it's willing and able to embrace design as a key strategic influence. And so that means for us, we get to connect more deeply with other parts of the organization. So we can do more than just design great systems and interfaces. We have opportunities to design new ways of engaging. And we don't just have to help the marketing department make better marketing. We can actually help them make marketing better within their organization and more broadly. And that's a tough job. That's a big ask for us, but God knows it's necessary, right? Our opportunity, I think, is to inspire stories that inspire change. I think we have a real chance here to take our skills and bring them to bear in a very, very meaningful way, not just to make companies have a better interface layer, not just to tell better stories about them, but to inspire stories that will change them. And I think that's the kind of delight that we should be aiming for. Not just a great interface, not just an amazing experience, not the cookie when you check into the hotel. Those are all great, important things and expressions of humanity. But I think if we aim for delight to help companies become more purposeful, more rational, and ultimately more human, then I think we've done an incredibly important job. And we've delivered on the potential of design as it now connects with business. I think very quickly, very often when you get into work, that kind of thinking seems kind of unlikely and frankly fairly naive. But I think that's okay because that's how all heroic stories begin. Thank you.